Snowflakes drifted past the twinkling skyline of New York City, each one glittering like a tiny promise. Inside the penthouse that overlooked it all, Ethan Cole, the 42-year-old CEO of a billion-dollar company, sat by a grand fireplace utterly alone. The mansion-sized apartment was silent, save for the faint crackle of burning wood and the echo of his own thoughts. Every Christmas was the same. No family. No laughter. Just him and the ghosts of everything he'd sacrificed to build his empire. Years ago, Ethan had believed success would fill the emptiness left after losing his parents in a car accident and breaking off his engagement because love could wait, business couldn't. But as the clock neared midnight and the city sparkled with warmth he couldn't feel, Ethan realized love hadn't waited. It had passed him by. He sighed, turning back to his untouched dinner when knock. 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 Startled, he frowned. Who would visit him on Christmas Eve? The security downstairs never allowed surprises. He opened the door and found a woman, bundled in a worn red coat, holding a steaming homemade apple pie, and beside her stood a little girl, maybe 7, clutching a small paper bag wrapped in ribbons. "Hi," the woman said, a little out of breath. "I'm sorry to bother you. We live in the building next door, and my daughter insisted we deliver pies to everyone in the neighborhood who might be spending Christmas alone." Ethan blinked. "How do you know I'm alone?" The little girl spoke up, her big brown eyes earnest. "Because your lights are on, but nobody else's voice is inside." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You brought me a pie?" She nodded proudly. "Mom made it. I helped with the cinnamon." The woman smiled awkwardly. "I'm Grace. This is Lila. We just moved in last week. I hope it's okay we stopped by." For the first time in years, Ethan stepped aside and said, "It's more than okay. Please, come in." The scent of cinnamon and baked apples soon filled the penthouse. Grace noticed how pristine and lonely everything felt. "Not a decoration in sight, don't you decorate for Christmas?" she asked gently. Ethan shrugged. "I used to. But it felt pointless." Lila tilted her head. "That's sad. Christmas is for sharing, not sitting." Something in her innocence pierced through the armor he'd built over the years. They ate pie together at his long, empty dining table, 3 chairs occupied for the first time in a decade. Grace shared how she worked 2 jobs, raising Lila after her husband left. "Money's tight, but we try to give back every Christmas," she said softly. "Sometimes kindness is all we can afford." Ethan looked at her, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spread in his chest. "You've given me more than you know." As the night grew deeper, Lila spotted an old grand piano in the corner. "Can I play?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. The melody she played, a simple version of Silent Night, echoed through the apartment, filling every cold corner with life. Grace watched him quietly, and for the first time in years, Ethan smiled. Not the polite corporate kind, a real, unguarded one. After the song ended, Lila yawned. "Mom, can we invite him for Christmas dinner tomorrow?" Grace froze, embarrassed. "Lila." But Ethan interrupted, voice soft. "I'd be honored." The next day, Ethan found himself sitting at a tiny kitchen table in Grace's apartment. There were mismatched plates, half-burned cookies, and a tree decorated with handmade paper stars. Yet somehow, it felt warmer than any luxury he'd ever bought. When Grace passed him a plate of roasted chicken, he asked, "Why do you do this?" "You barely know me." She smiled. "Because everyone deserves to feel remembered. Even CEOs." Something inside Ethan cracked open. By the end of dinner, he'd laughed more than he had in years. Lila made him wear a Santa hat and insisted on a photo. Grace's laughter echoed around him, real, human, healing. And somewhere between dessert and goodbye, Ethan realized something extraordinary: he didn't want to spend another Christmas alone again. Over the next year, things changed. Ethan quietly funded a local charity Grace volunteered for anonymously, at first. He started leaving work early. He helped Lila with her school projects. And when Christmas rolled around again, it wasn't Grace and Lila knocking on his door, it was him knocking on theirs. He stood outside, holding a homemade pie slightly burnt but baked with effort and a gift-wrapped box for Lila. When Grace opened the door, surprised, Ethan smiled nervously. "I thought maybe this year I could bring the pie." Lila squealed and threw her arms around him. Grace's eyes shimmered with warmth inside, laughter and music replaced the silence that once filled his heart. Years later, people still talked about Ethan Cole, the CEO who once built a fortune but found true wealth in a small act of kindness on a snowy Christmas Eve. That he never missed another Christmas after that. Not because of business or loneliness, but because one little girl had reminded him what it truly meant to be seen, to be cared for, to be human, and every year after, he'd tell the same story. How a single mom and her daughter knocked on my door and opened my heart. Moral: sometimes, the smallest knock can open the biggest door, not to a home, but to a heart that had forgotten what love felt like.